All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Small Business Workshop, Navigating the Headwinds of Crisis. This particular session will be focused on leadership and communication. Before we get started, I want to let you know that we are recording this session, so please be mindful this session is being recorded. It will be available later today, mid-afternoon at DPTV, that's Detroit Public Television, DPTV. Their YouTube channel. So feel free to, we have a lot of people watching these workshops. So we encourage you to visit it and feel free to share it with as many people as you like. So I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you. My name is Mark Lee. I'm the president and CEO of the Lee Group, which is headquartered here in the Detroit area. And we do, obviously, we are an integrated marketing communications consulting organization. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, Fifth Third Bank, and also Comcast Business and the Detroit Development Fund for continuing their continued support for the Small Business Workshop. All right, we're going to jump right into it. This is the second from last workshop. Our last one will be next week, next Wednesday, July 29th. We'll come back to that a little bit later. And I'd like to introduce Ivana Kalafatic, and she's a marketing and communications innovator and founder and CEO of the media website Detroit Is It and digital marketing agency Together. Ivana, thanks for joining us, and we'll turn it right over to you.
Mark, thank you so much for having me. This is a pretty exciting opportunity to be able to share some of my thoughts and our thoughts about how we've been looking at what's going on within the crisis from a marketing perspective and communicating and what the power of storytelling really means within times like this. So I can't thank you enough for inviting me on as a guest, and also to Fifth Third and to Comcast and your other partners that have been able to support you through this important messaging and in this important time. So this is critical for us to think through collectively how to look at this situation that we're all in a bigger way. So I think what I'm going to do then is jump into the discussion points and share my screen. So bear with me one moment here. And I think you should be able to see the screen at this point. So really what I wanted to share a bit on is, can everybody see that? I hope? Okay. So we're really looking at how do we communicate and not just project, but really start taking ownership of this concept of leadership. And as small business owners, one of which I am, I think it's pretty important for us to think through positioning ourselves, thinking what we did well in the past, what others are doing well, what's going on presently, and of course, how we're going to be able to really strive to do our best for the future. So I'm a big believer in questions. I think that it's about an open dialogue between all parties. And truly, to preface this, nobody has the right answer. I hope that we can probably collectively come to that same conclusion that really nobody has a right answer. And it's just about thinking through the opportunities and seeing where some possible answers may lead us to. So a little bit about me. Mark, you gave us a introduction. I've been in the business of communicating and marketing for the last, now I don't know if I want to date myself, but about 20 years. I had a magazine by the name of Clear Magazine that I was a co-founder and editor of, that was internationally distributed. I've been doing strategy and communications and marketing for big brands from the automotive side, and also agencies. I had the chance to work on a couple really exciting projects with cities and rebranding of strategies of cities like Los Angeles and Atlantic City. And I'm from Detroit. I've lived in Metro Detroit my entire life, left and came back again, about 5 years ago. And I started looking at this chance or the opportunity to take storytelling and shift it into a new dynamic. So what we have today and what I own, two businesses. One is called Detroit Is It. It's a digital media website, and it's about the hyper-localization of storytelling of individuals and communities within Detroit and Greater Detroit. And the other, as you mentioned, is Together. And Together is a digital marketing agency. And really what we pride ourselves on is taking complex problems, primarily digital, and simplifying them for solutions for our clients. So we have a whole range of different clients that we work with, and a whole different range of size of clients that we work with. I myself, and I think it's really important to share your personal story because I think it allows us to have a lot of relativity with both ourselves, our audience, and presumably, and hopefully, at least in my case, our clients. So I'm really big into being curious about things. I don't like stopping myself if I can. So I'm a big reader, for example. I kind of take things to another level with research. Maybe that's also the editorial and the journalism side of me coming out. But I really enjoy knowing that I'm curious about things, and I think that that leads to avenues you might not be aware that you had, or opportunities, or even ways of overcoming challenges that you might not even have been aware that you had, as a sense of support, both professionally and personally. So I would definitely encourage everybody to be as curious as possible, because it's simply a more interesting world, I think, in that way. The second point is that I've, like most of us, been through a lot as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. I think you really kind of have to realize that you're going to have hurdles in your professional career. You're going to have hurdles with projects that you work on. And if you think of the ways that you can really challenge yourself and ultimately overcome these hurdles, I think that that's a great mindset to have, because overcoming things really helps you get to another level, at least in my experience. And then the third is that I truly do believe I'm a innate entrepreneur. So we were talking a little earlier. I have worked for corporate communications with General Motors. I've worked within the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. And in my beginning of my career, I started realizing I'm really, really good at probably not not being told exactly what to do, but rather taking my own control over the business that I have. So I truly do believe you should follow where your mind and your heart takes you on a professional level. And that could also be an intrapreneur within a corporate environment, and really thinking innovatively within the space that you're in. But myself, I am an entrepreneur, and that's why I'm also thrilled to be on this panel, and thrilled to be talking through how we can look at small businesses and the support that we can give to one another at this time. So it's a little bit about me. So, we've been talking, Mark, Jennifer, Beth, and I, we've been talking through what these topics are, and really the challenges that we find ourselves in these days. And if I could say, I know in my lifetime, I've never lived through something like this. This is truly a experience that on a professional level, you're challenged every day. On a personal level, you're challenged every day. You've got families that are educating children at home, plus individuals that have to be at work as well every day. You don't have your regular agenda and your regular schedule of getting in a car and going to work. So all of a sudden, what was it now, 3-4 months ago, come March, we really had to rethink really quickly how we're going to do this, every one of us. And I think the one thing that really got me as surprised as I was then and now is in many ways how quickly we all adapted. We really, truly, as a collective community, and especially I would say within the Detroit area, as you look on the national level, we really adapted pretty quickly. So one of the things that I told my team, so our team's pretty tight. We have a boutique setup, both with Detroit Is It and with the agency. And we've got 6 people full-time. And then we have freelancers that come in depending on what the projects are. So it's a tight, small team. And I pride ourselves on being nimble, on being very communicative internally. But one thing that I definitely said to my team from straight up, I think it was even on the 13th of March, you know, I said, we're staying home. We're not going to come back to this environment that we don't know what's going to be, you know, awaiting us. So we were we were all on the same page, and we've been working mobily, and we were pretty adamant to stay safe, and in our minds to stay safe and to stay home. And I have to say, I'm really proud of the way that we handled that, and the way that we were looking through solutions, both for the team, or I was for the team, and also for our clients, because you have to pick up a phone, you have to be extremely available, and as we're talking about these points, be transparent on how we're handling this as an agency and as a media platform, but also what their needs are, and letting them know that we're available and that we're listening and that we're hearing them. So I think at this point right now, as we're looking at this new normal and leadership practices that we as business owners and as innovators within this space and as marketers within this space, and all of us on the phone on this end really truly are marketers and leaders within that thought process, I think being transparent could not be more critical. I think if you look at this in a way that's about humanizing the perspective, knowing again that we're all going through this together, and this idea of being transparent, it helps soothe the anxiety. It helps knowing that we're all in this collectively together, because challenges arise. So I was wanting to, with this part of the conversation, you know, we've been thinking through how to best approach some of these topics that we have, and being that all 4 of us on the outgoing end, on the call and on the panel, you know, we all have great former and existing experiences. So I wanted to tap into a couple of conversations between us at this point in the conversation. And Beth Oates with Fifth Third Bank, you know, you're in a corporate environment, you're in a downtown environment, you have multiple locations within the bank at Fifth Third. You're honing in on employees' needs, you're honing in on clients and walk-in needs. You are the communications lead for the organization within this region. You've got your executives that you also need to be addressing their needs for the situation. So my experience was, as I mentioned, we kind of packed up. We have a co-sharing space downtown out of Tech Town, which we love, love, love. But I just said, you know, guys, it's time for us to stay safe and go home. How did you, and those beginning days, how did you handle this notion of being transparent across the board? Again, you've got different audiences that you're talking to. How did that transpire for you and for Fifth Third through your leadership at Fifth Third on the communication side?
Sure. So I'm looking at this from a different angle, but then also finding ways to tailor it to my local community, to our local employees. So at the end of the day, when we're talking about being transparent in communications, it's about being honest. It's about providing information in a timely manner and avoiding ambiguity. And we do this for a couple of reasons. So regardless if you're talking to your employees, you're talking to your community, you're talking to your clients, we're doing it to make sure that they feel included, that they feel valued. When you don't share information, people often make assumptions or come up with just, you know, ideas that couldn't be farther from the truth, right? So March 13th, I think it was a Friday,
Mm-hmm.
the office, went to meet some friends for dinner, and had a meeting pop up for 6:30 p.m. Okay, so that's not the norm for me. So right off the bat, my first experience was not one that was normal. So it was my boss, who's our regional president here in Eastern Michigan, and my colleagues who are the senior leaders of our business lines. And we were informed, okay, some of you are going to start working from home. So the non-client facing people, that's me. So a handful of us, as of that Monday, we're going to work from home. So what my job was to figure, okay, so I know what this means for me. What does this mean for everybody else? 700 people that are in Eastern Michigan at Fifth Third Bank. So I had to work with my boss, our local leaders, and to understand what their employees need to know. So at the end of the day, big company, but you always have to shrink down that message and get it out to your audience. So that was one of the first things we did, is understanding what does corporate want us to say, and how does that translate to our people in a way that makes sense and is answering the questions that are really important to them, especially where we're at. So in our footprint of 13 states, Michigan has gotten hit really hard. So then my job evolved again to understand, okay, so this is what's happening in Ohio, but what matters to us here in Eastern Michigan? So my role really has been understanding what our governor is doing, what the president is doing, what statewide we're seeing, what my company is doing, what my boss needs, what my colleagues need, what the senior leaders need, and packaging it up and then getting it out, whether it's to our employees or our customers.
Mm-hmm. And you had this on a 24/7 basis, ultimately. I mean, you really had a lot on your plate. You really had to think through both what the brand strategy is, regardless of COVID, regardless of restrictions and lockdown. And then you had to deal with the situation at hand, which was this extreme scenario of a complete pandemic, and communicate it at the same time. I mean, talk about multitasking. I mean, multitasking, this is something I think that being a marketer and a communicator and a leader in that thought space, you truly do need to learn and know and hone in the skills of multitasking, because you've got to handle that in order to make sure that the communication that you're putting out there is congruent and both ethical, because you're dealing with things that we've never dealt with before, but also has that storyline that is all about the brands in play. So how, one thing on the transparency side, one thing that it took me a while, and now that I'm doing it, I'm pretty adamant about for myself and also for our team, is asking for support. I think, and it comes in all different levels. It comes from top down, it comes from bottom up, it comes from friends, it comes from those that are like-minded. Like, I remember having conversations with friends of mine that are in competitive situations with marketing agencies, and I'm so proud of all that they do. I mean, we had calls after calls after calls just to figure out, what are they doing maybe differently? How are they looking at things maybe differently? So, when you look at the support structure, how do you handle that on your end and within the Fifth Third ecosystem?
So what's been interesting about the pandemic versus other crises that I've experienced in my professional career is the emotion that's tied to this. So whereas look back to 2008, I worked at a financial services company there. That was a financial crisis. What we're going through now is a social crisis, a health crisis. So the things that we may have worried about in the past, weeks before the pandemic, came down on us, everything has changed. So when we are feeling uncertain, it can be our health, it can be our family, it can be our job. Part of our job now is to share those emotions and those feelings, because it's going to comfort others. I would say in the last 4 months, I've talked about my feelings and the reactions I've had to things more than I have in my entire career. And so in doing that, you're offering support to others and helping them, get an understanding this new normal. That it's normal that I didn't really want to leave my house for a few weeks, that it's normal that I'm worried about my job. It's normal that I'm worried about my family's health. So we are sharing information in a different way, I think in a more vulnerable way. And in turn, when you share that, other people are going to also ask for support. So, right now, like, if you kind of think of your company and your employees as a team sport, then the value of each individual player, right? So you offer them support, you're going to need support back. You can't win a game without your team. So this vulnerability and the sharing of emotion right now, I think is probably more important than any time in my career. So I know that when I've shared information with my team members, friends of mine that sit in completely, different areas of the country and are experiencing different things, it's been really helpful for me to share my feelings, to share my concern about what's going on, things that I'm doing that seem to have helped me out, can help out my local leadership team, other professionals I work with. So it's the sharing of information that goes both ways, that you're lending your support and you're also encouraging people when you're open and vulnerable like that to help you out when you need it.
Yeah. And I mean, 100% agree. And I think it's also about that humanizing factor that you really can have that connectivity. Then you make it real, you make it your own. And interestingly enough, as big and as small or as heavy or as light your experiences are through this time, somehow or another, there's always a sense of similarity through the experiences that you have. And as you start sharing them, it just allows that to be it allows you to be that much closer. So I think this notion of transparency, I would say, is, to me, key. It's key to really making sure that we're all on the same page. And if nothing else, realizing that it's okay. Things, this is life, and things happen, and it's okay. And just on this last point on this topic, one thing that I've been fascinated by is how empathetic leadership has been across many, many, many companies about understanding what their employees are going through and what the market is going through. And I think that that's also a great tool set for all of us to have. And it's something that I definitely, as a leader of our troop on our end, I definitely take to heart, to be as empathetic as possible. So Beth, thank you. I think everything that that you just shared with us is what I feel as well, and something to learn from. So thank you for sharing. Thank you. Going into this next topic of learning to inspire. So I touched upon this earlier, and storytelling to me is a kind of given in my life. I think that having pieces that connect through story and having pieces that connect through a personalization of that story and communicating that is pretty critical to have relationships be built. And again, personalizing and humanizing that experience. And especially now, as we're going through this and as we're looking at what happened and is still happening with the protests, as we're looking at, oh gosh, unrest in ways that we probably in our generation have not experienced before. Maybe in the 60s, there was a different time with different types of unrest. Every decade or so, there's been something pretty huge that's happened. This is our huge, this thing that's happening right now, these moments that we're in with the pandemic and the protests, and really the sense of not knowing what can happen. Two huge things happened just the last 4 or 5 months. Who knows what's around the corner? So I'm a huge believer in inspiring. I'm a big believer in, and this is just how I cope and deal with things, with working through things. In other words, I don't stop my work And we actually very collectively decided through my guidance, but decided that nothing on our workload side is minimizing or stopping. Number one, we've got a media platform, so there's plenty to write about. So that kept us very busy. But number two, we have clients to deliver to. And, you know, as you look at inspiring, you also have to be inspired. So I'm a communicator. I have a media platform. I have a digital marketing agency, and I have to manage that process for readers and for clients. Mark, you are in somewhat of a similar situation as we are. You're a leader within the marketing communication space. You are you're sharing your stories continuously. You've got clients that you have to work for and towards, and of course you've got an audience that listens and that follows you. And through all of that, you need to be inspired in order to inspire others, to keep them close to you, listening to you, watching you, and following you. So I sometimes find hard, difficult, like we're actually in a mode right now on that with the Detroit Is It side, on looking for stories that might not be too negative versus going to stories that might be a little bit more positive. So what is it that you do? Are there any sort of guiding points, rules of thumb that you might have that you utilize for your inspiration, for your business, and for your clients?
Yeah, and before we proceed, I know we're getting questions, so feel free to drop your questions in the chat room. We'll start answering questions at about 10:40 or so. Great question, Ivana. Thanks for having me participate as part of your panel. At the end of the day, I find stories, I share information that's authentic, and especially in these challenging times from a business standpoint. I'm very fortunate. You're right. I'm on TV here in Detroit. I do radio in Detroit. I contribute to so many various publications in print platforms. A lot of people know from Detroit, for example, and other places. I also teach college students. I have to inspire. And the best stories that I share, whether it's on radio, whether it's on TV, whether it's whether I'm writing or teaching, is what I'm sharing from the heart, authentic stories. And I've had more people tell me that when they listen to my speaking, I'm a public speaker, although I'm mumbling right now, the stories that resonate with people, the ones that inspire the most, are the ones that you're authentic. So when people approach me, particularly in these challenging times, about sharing their story, I had someone last night send me a long email about what they wanted me to interview them, and I simply replied, I said, "You're not giving me a story." I said, "You want to use my platform to promote yourself." And this individual, she and I were going back and forth through LinkedIn. And finally this morning, she emailed me to say, "I hear you. I hear you. You were correct." And my point was, I said, the only stories that I share are those that I really think will connect with my audience, that will connect with your audience. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening this morning, same thing as you communicate to your employees. You have to be authentic with them. You have to have a vision. What is your vision? When we think about the challenges that we're currently going through, Donna, a lot of people just jump from, the top of the platform to the water, right? But they don't have that plan. They still don't have the vision. So I'm going to ask all of you on this call, on this video chat, what is your vision as you're thinking about communicating in this new normal? So from a leadership standpoint, understand what your vision is to get through the pandemic, and then hopefully post-COVID-19, we can move on, which we got challenges. It's going to be a while. Number two, what is your strategy? So even as you're inspiring people, you have to make sure you effectively communicate to your employees. They need to understand what your vision is. They need to understand what your goals are, but they also need to understand how are you going to do it. And that's a challenge, because when I ask people, what is your strategy? They give me tactics. See, tactics and strategies are two different things. The strategies are how are you going to achieve your objective, your end game, and then your tactics are exactly what do you do. So that's the long and short of saying, make sure that you're authentic, make sure that you have a vision, a mission, that you're transparent. I love your first one, transparent, and make sure that everyone is on board. It's okay to have open dialogue and open conversation during these difficult times. Not everyone's going to agree, but at the end of the day, you want to solicit that input from all of your employees and your clients in order for you to proceed on a go-forward basis. But be authentic.
Again, Blair smart. Couldn't agree more. This is, you know, a lot of what we do on the marketing side through Together is, and we pride ourselves on this, and you hit it on the head, strategy. You know, we've heard over the years how people follow their dreams for business. And I think that this is a real big lesson to learn now in this new normal that we're going through. You know, you want to follow your dreams and start a, you know, let's say a cafe, or, you know, a retail environment that they've always dreamt of starting, but that might not necessarily be the business for you to be in. So I think really going through and understanding what the strategy is to your business and how you're going to be applying from the financial wherewithal to the marketing wherewithal to the business development wherewithal. You can't just, and I see this sometimes within the city that we're in, and I'm not about squashing anybody's dreams, believe me, and we've all been through our own ups and downs with our businesses. But one thing I think that is missing in a lot of cases is strategy, and having the grounding of knowing how you're going to survive the next 10 years, 15, 20 years. And as we've been talking through also, and it's these words that come up, this idea of building out generational wealth. So how do you build out these businesses that really will have a long tail to them, so that it doesn't, you know, you don't have this sort of thought process, well, you know, I'll start a business, and if it doesn't succeed, it doesn't succeed. Well, starting a business, you need to put in the money, the time, and the energy into that, whether that's your money or startup money or a bank investing and funding you or others. All of that takes money and time and energy, but ultimately the foundation to that is strategy. Knowing why you're doing what you're doing, what location in the city you're doing it in, if it's a physical space, and who you're targeting, who your audience is, how you're going to talk to them, how you're going to communicate to them. And I do believe that you know, a lot of people tend to open up businesses, I'm not going to say on a whim, but on a dream, which is good, but know that you have the strategy. So I think, Mark, you couldn't be more spot on with that, because that is also going to help you stabilize yourself through this process. And stabilizing yourself might actually be, for some, going out of business. That might be a better scenario, given the fact that there isn't the foot traffic that we're anticipating to have within the next few months or next few years.
And I can just add two more things real quick before you move on, Ivana, is also people need to be flexible, right? So when I launched my career a long time ago, I launched my career in corporate America. I worked my way to senior level opportunities nationally. I run international global companies as well. But, you know, we were told to have a plan, and we stuck to that plan. Now, in this new, I love your title here, New Normal Leadership Practices, is you have to be flexible as well. This pandemic is forcing us to pivot, to change, and adopt new strategies that are certainly being adaptable to the times. And the last piece is, not only do you have to be flexible, Ivana, you have to have relationships. Leverage
100%.
relationships.
Yeah.
Leverage those relationships, particularly in these challenging times. I mean, I got Jennifer Gomez on here, for example. I connected through Jennifer through someone that I know, and they connected us. So it's that relationship that I've known you for years. I've known Beth for a while. So make sure that you continue to leverage those relationships. But as we're going through these challenging times, also don't forget to be flexible as well.
Excellent points. And back to the relationships, this is what we were talking about also with Beth on support, really honing in on who you know, who you don't know even, but building out that commonality in those conversations to help all of us be better and be more, and survive and thrive through these times, because nobody has the answer. But these are all excellent strategies, Mark, that you're talking about. So I'm going to repeat some of them because I've been writing them down. Also, being authentic, having a strategy, being transparent, owning relationships and working through them, and also being flexible. And I would say probably out of everything that I've experienced on my end as an entrepreneur, flexibility is probably the number one asset in my toolkit that I've needed to rely on more often than not. And I call it kind of being a chameleon also, where you just kind of, the situation that you're in, you need to adapt to it, and you need to also be okay that you're not okay. Be okay that somebody else might know something bigger, better, more than you, and learn from that. So I think that actually is a beautiful segue to our third point, which is really about adapting and innovating. And Jennifer and I are going to have a little conversation on this topic. So for us, as an example, on the innovation side, with a very particular scenario, through Detroit Is It, we realized that we might have a tool set that others could benefit from within the city. And we built out within 4 days, I have to say, I'm beyond proud of my team. We built out within 4 days a tool that is called the DetroitHelpHub.com. It's online. And it's a small business mapping tool that's real time. There's a mobile component to it. So there's a searchable component to it. There's a geography-based component to it. And it's all about searching what is near you to shop or eat through. And as a business, you can, so it's restaurants and stores, you can sign up in a very simple way. There's 15 different ways of you being shopped on this platform, from Venmo to PayPal to Uber Eats, you name it. And we've got organically now over 100 signups and individuals that are utilizing it. And that tool is actually something that we are magnifying into a much larger opportunity that I'm not going to go into details on now, but Detroit will be introduced to it at the end of the year. That's really about supporting all small businesses and the shopping of all small businesses within the city. So point being, we pivoted very quickly. So this was March, and we launched it in early April. Just seeing what we could do on our end, what our, let's say, expertise is, and digital expertise. And we put that out pretty quickly. So Jennifer, tell us a little bit about your background and also how you view innovating and adapting in your business.
Thanks, Ivana. I appreciate that. And good morning, everybody. So, innovation right now, it's been touched on in today's conversation, and I'm certain that everybody who's participating with today's discussion has experienced this, but we're at a point where it's not optional, it's essential. Our climate that we're in right now, that's been dictated by the social crisis that we're experiencing, has made it where your comfort level, perhaps your approach of business as usual, is no longer sustainable. So I think that's one of the first things that everybody, has to recognize, whether it's by force or by being proactive. It's accepting this new normal that we're in, where innovation is absolutely essential. But the other part that I would, mention about this, and it was touched on extensively, with Mark's conversation just now, and I was smiling throughout it because it's literally what I was intending to emphasize as well, and that's having flexibility. So right now, any conversations I have with, colleagues, with clients, with, Mark and I, with what we've been discussing, it's been rooted in flexibility. And that's essential, again, touching on the fact that being innovative right now is absolutely, not optional, but your flexibility is required because right now, things are changing so quickly. So we have an environment where what we know one week is very different than what we're going to know the next week. And that in turn impacts our businesses in how we operate. So I mentioned that because the operation of it is so key. And it's not just what perhaps you're offering as your service model and what you're providing to your clients, but how. So we have some examples that we can discuss at a high level, and then I'll certainly give a more detailed example of what Mark and I worked through even with this small business workshop. So there's been some research I've been doing as well, just to kind of keep a pulse on what's happening with different industries, how are people adapting. And there's the meetings and events industry, as you can imagine, one of the most hardest hit industries because of this, because you literally can't have a meeting in person right now, right? So this platform that a lot of professional event planners and event production specialists have been working with for decades is now reverting. And so I'm looking at some other organizations, some other businesses that are in this industry, and what they're doing is they're moving to a virtual platform. So the adaption, the flexibility that they're displaying isn't saying that we're not going to do meetings, but how? How is their service model going to pivot and change with this new environment? Similarly, and this goes to how are you actually going to handle your business and have your service model produced. We had on our opening session for the small business workshop, Rachel Lutz, who is, for the most part working in retail. Well, she so far to this point, as far as I know, at least this was the case a few weeks ago still, decided to go ahead and revert to a complete online platform for her services. So instead of in person, that face-to-face, that, environment where somebody's walking into your store literally, it's now an online service. And so she'll, be available to her clients online. She has, periodically, live type workshops or, service offerings where she shows her products, which is great. But those were the ways that those two industries pivoted. So we have our event production and we have our retail. So they're changing not only perhaps what they're offering, but how they're offering it. And the example that I can even give, which is in real time and something that each of us are experiencing with today's discussion, is what we did with the small business workshop. So originally the small business workshop, and this is Mark's 6th year of hosting it, is done in person. It's a one-day session. So everything that everybody's experiencing is still included, except it's all done in one day. As you can imagine, when the crisis started unfolding back in March, we had to really evaluate, okay, what's going to happen? And so I'll share these details because I think they're critical with the ability to adapt and what anybody who's on the line right now would want to take notes for what they're going to experience, not just in real time, but really what's going to be in front of us still for several months, if not a year. And what we had done was we looked at the scenario in that exact moment back in March, and the decision we made was to pause. Let's keep a pulse on what's happening. Let's continue to evaluate. Let's assess the situation on a daily basis, really, not just weekly, daily. And we had our regular touch base points of, every other week to say, okay, here's where we stand currently. And the outcome of that was that we really had to react to what was possible. And not just in terms of what, our government guidance was in terms of what was allowed, but what made sense to show that respect and safety concern for those that would be attending, whether they were attendees or participants with, presenting. And so that led us to where we're at. So we came up with a scenario where, okay, we can still produce this, but now we're going to do it in what is permissible with today's environment. And that's translated into what we're experiencing today. We now have a series. We now have an ongoing workshop where we're still presenting the information, but it's virtual. We broke it into pieces because obviously we wanted to be considerate of not keeping somebody on a virtual webinar for 6 hours. So instead we put it into pieces, and it's been really positive. The feedback that we've gotten from participants, which is, well over 150, registrations that we've had with, the various workshops collectively. Our participants who have been sponsors, presenters, have really liked the idea that we've been able to adapt to not just still providing the information, but in a context and format that they could really engage with and still have takeaways that they could apply to what their business scenarios are. So I think that's what, I would really say about the innovation. It's essential. You have to have flexibility, And you have to have that ability to adapt with whatever your services are in the format that would be necessary.
All incredible points. Maybe Jennifer, if you go on mute, if you don't mind, I think, okay, there we go. Got a little bit of feedback from the both of us, and then come back in again. One thing, and I think a lot of us can probably attest to this, and this is back to being a tactic. One thing that I think we can all agree to is that digital is the future. And as we look at where we're going, and from a safety precaution perspective, but also back to the innovation perspective, really learning how to digitize your story and how to digitize your experience, both internally and externally. I can't stress enough. I mean, yes, it's what we do, and yes, it's our business. But even as you just mentioned with Rachel in the Peacock Room and the retail experience, being able to shift her mindset, but also being able to shift her audience and her clients away from a physical walk-in space into something that is a digital experience is key. So having that flexibility and having that understanding that maybe you might need help through this, maybe you don't, but regardless, that innovation on a tactical end of being digital, I cannot stress enough. And knowing how to do that properly, so that you also stand out, away from the crowd, because the one problem with digital is that you got to be searched. So with a store, you can drive to it and you know pretty much where it is with an address that you can GPS to. But if Google doesn't like you on search, good luck. So there's a lot of knowing and learning and having that sense of business acumen to take all of these things that we just talked about: support system, flexibility, learning, different tools and trades that other people are utilizing, and then morphing them and modifying them for your own business. Because once more, we're in this new normal, and good, who knows for how long this could take. This could take years, and I think we need to be prepared that that this is what's awaiting us. And guess what? We can work from home. We can be productive. We can still have kids running around in the background and still hosting and having panel discussions. So we can do this. It's all manageable. It's just being able to have that flexibility and adaptation opportunity to be innovative and to think through it collectively together. So I'm going to move to the next slide. I hope I'm going to move.
We're going to open it up for Q&A in about 2 minutes. We have 11.
Yep. And that was going to be the point of the next slide. And you think I can move it down there? There we go. Okay. So that's exactly where we're at now is, and I wanted to leave this as a takeaway: communicating in a crisis and some tips. And this is just pretty much a recap of what we've been touching on. Learning how to engage and being that storyteller around the personalization of your story, so that it becomes something that's as authentic as possible for others, is a great tool to engaging. How do you innovate? And learning how to innovate, whether that's a tool like going digital, whether that's a strategy like thinking bigger picture and having the flexibility around innovating. Learning also how to move forward. I mean, through all of this, we truly need to look at the future and look at the scenarios that we've been in and think positive and move towards the future. Believing in what you're best at. And I think that goes back to not just having a dream of having a business of some kind, but actually realizing what you're really good at so that you can make money off of it and you can survive and you can thrive in this environment, I think is a really big thing. And certainly realizing, that we can't walk away from this. We are in this new normal, and how do we adapt to that? So those are my takeaway tips from the conversation that we had thus far, and completely open to Q&A, Mark, when you're ready.
I want to thank you, Ivana. I want to thank Beth and Jennifer. We want to try just a roundtable discussion, which is what this was about, was just providing you with practical advice and counsel based on their experiences. We have a the corporate perspective, if you will, with Beth from Fifth Third Bank, and Jennifer certainly as an entrepreneur who also works in a corporate space, but she's shared with you her perspective. And of course, Ivana, an entrepreneur who's been doing some great things here in Detroit, as well as across the country. So one question from Hayward Crawford, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages or pros and cons of going into a small business full time? And I would modify that. This is for you, Ivana. Not just going into business full time, that's part of it, but that's by extension. How about going into business full time during this pandemic, during this crisis? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. And I think this goes back to not only, and I truly mean this, and I don't mean this to negate anybody's, dreams. I think everybody needs to be really realistic right now. Number one, is that business something that you are pretty confident or know that you can truly financially survive with? And maybe it is. Maybe this is the time. Again, I don't know what the business is in particular that the individual is talking about, but will that business be a financially viable and feasible business now and longer term? And I think something to think through now is the client base. Is this a retail experience? Is this something that's digital? If it's digital, how capable are you on the digital side? Do you have the financial wherewithal to support that? I think marketing, I can't stress this enough. I think marketing is key for, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here too. I think that marketing is key for all businesses today and really learning how to market. And one hand, I think having your own small business at this time might be the way. Maybe it's a consulting business and you have an expertise that others don't, that you can really add value to at this time right now. So I think my answer would be, it depends on the business. And if you have the financial wherewithal, I can't stress that enough, try it and see where it goes. But note that marketing and your audience are going to be 1 and 2 key components to making sure that you've got some success to that.
And in this unusual times, how do you begin to, this is another part of his questions, to mitigate that risk? So you understand the opportunities that might be out there, even during a pandemic, these new opportunities, but how do you balance that with the business risk that we're currently in? And so in other words, you have an opportunity to do something online as opposed to brick and mortar, for example. Mm-hmm. But we also know that there's a lot of risk out there. How do you balance that? What are you supposed to look for as you're thinking about pursuing an opportunity in these challenging times? That'll be our final question. We'll wrap up.
Yeah, well, I think you have to know what you're delivering, right? You can't be guessing what it is. And that delivery might be selling t-shirts, which is fantastic. And that delivery might be selling, being a dentist. That delivery might be, selling strategy. So A, you have to see what your bigger picture is. B, you have to subcategorize. So for example, if you're a retailer, are you focusing on women's or men's or pets? If you're into strategy, are you doing something that's completely different than somebody else? To be able to uniquely identify what you uniquely can offer that others can't, I think is a really big thing as a entrepreneur as well. And also going into the corporate environment. I mean, you want to set yourself apart from others in order to be hired within a corporate environment, and also to be an entrepreneur, to offer your services. So mitigating the risk, I think, is finding your unique niche that that you can do better than others, especially at this time. And that could be waiting, well, now that probably isn't so much the case. I was going to say, waiting tables, whatever it is that you do best, but know that there's a financial component behind that you can survive through. That to me would be a way of mitigating an equitable risk, so that you're not one of many offering many of the same things that's out there.
Okay. So I want to thank Ivana for her time this morning and leading a discussion We have one final session left. Ivana, thank you again very much. We do appreciate
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark, and everybody.
I want to turn over to Jennifer just to kind of provide an overview of our last session, which is scheduled for next week. Jennifer.
Of course. Thanks so much, Mark. I appreciate that. So we're really excited to wrap things up next week, July 29th, because it's going to be a great topic to really kind of pull everything together and leave the attendees with a blueprint, really, for next steps about a really critical topic. We're going to be exploring the value of relationships and also how do you sustain your brand during these times of change. So Lydia Michael will be leading the conversation. It's on Wednesday, July 29th. As mentioned in previous sessions, it's always at 10 a.m. Eastern. We do share the registration information immediately following this session, so you'll receive that. We look forward to everybody's participation. We think it's going to be a nice way to kind of round out all the different topics that we've been working through as they've built upon one another. And as Mark has mentioned before, all of our previous sessions, of course, are available as they've been recorded and published. So we'll do the same with next week's as well, but we certainly welcome and encourage as much participation as possible.
Okay, so with that, thank you all very much for your time, and go out and make it a great day. Stay safe, do the right thing, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.